Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Your Honour. I rise in support of this bill, which is before Parliament today, Business Barbados Bill. It is an extremely necessary piece of legislation, Your Honour. And of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm not bound by Cabinet, and I could speak more freely than if I were in Cabinet. The fact of the matter is that Kaipor is in a mess. That is the truth. Kaipor is not what it ought to be. And this is not the fault of any one administration. This has been so for years. And it lies within this administration right now to try and do its best to fix the problem. Barbados is not an easy place to do business in, whether within the private sector or the public sector. I believe that under the last administration, we were at, if I recall, about 139 in the world out of 175 odd countries that were being monitored in terms of ease of doing business. This administration had brought that down, if I recall, to about 119 or so out of the 176 before COVID came along. In other words, strides were being made in the first 2 years, bit less than 2 years of this administration in terms of making it easier to do business in this country. Whether for locals, because locals are first. We have a duty to our citizens, to our people, more than we have a duty to foreign investors. That is my opinion, at least. And for example, in relation to Kaipor, by that time, you could have incorporated or established a normal company, limited liability company, overnight. Whereas before, at one time, it used to take 2 weeks to incorporate a piece of company. That is the truth. A whole 2 weeks it used to take under the Democratic Labour Party up to then to incorporate a company, 5 documents, 1 page each, and a whole 2 weeks you can't get a company incorporated. And in other countries, in the Caribbean, in CARICOM, you were having overnight incorporation of companies. So during COVID, that is what resulted in Barbados. So reforms had started under Kaipor, but it was still, and it remains not fit for business. That is the truth. And if people are frustrated by processes, they will go elsewhere. They will say, look, I ain't bothering with this here anymore. Let me then form an ordinary business, which you can do, an entity in your personal name, pay $100 for it, $105, and done with that. Rather than a company which, of course, gives greater protection to the individuals behind the company, to the directors, etc. And therefore, this piece of legislation is extremely important, is significant, and has to be done. And it has fallen on this government, this administration, to try to reform so many areas of this country, so many aspects of doing business in this country that it isn't funny. And ease of doing business is one of the primary focuses of what a government ought to be. Because the more bureaucracy and difficulty and challenges you have in doing business, you're not going to get money. That's the reality of the situation. The economy is not going to revolve. Money is not going to flow. People are going to have to pay more taxes than they want to pay. Because everybody will like taxes reduced, that's the truth. But yet we still want free education, we still want free health care, we still want all the roads repaired, that the members of parliament responsible for repairing the roads. You still want street lights in every place. You still want clean water flowing throughout. But how is that going to happen if government departments and private sector too, as I said, private sector is not exempt from this, make it so difficult to do ordinary pieces of business? And KIPO falls in that category. This is nothing personal against anyone at KIPO and the Intellectual Property Office. When the Honourable Prime Minister had a colloquium about 2 months ago, Honourable Minister of Housing was organising it. I said at that KIPO needs to straighten up itself. That is the truth. I think the KIPO officers who were there were not happy with what I said. But I said that on the 24th or 25th of every month, the problem is, not the problem, the reality is that government workers getting paid, right? And if they get paid a few hours late, like what happened a week and a half ago at SSA, you go on strike or go slow. But government still has to pay the salaries of 28,000 people and provide all the services, social services, welfare, everything that the government of Barbados provides, that very few countries in the world provide. And countries that are much wealthier than this country don't provide, such as free education from nursery up to master's level, inclusive at University of the West Indies. That is the truth. But a lot of government workers, they don't comprehend that issue. That is the truth. So therefore, you get at KIPO, historically, that an address is, let's say, Robert Street, Bridgetown. But because you don't have Robert Street, Bridgetown, Barbados, the application come back, the document come back with a mark in it, and you got to reapply, and then a whole year afterwards, you can't get back your document that you paid for. Where's an annual return? Where is a financial statement? Where's a notice of change of directors with the director's name on it or address? That is the reality that we're facing in this country. Or that the company name, the XY company, so you leave off the XY company limited, and you just have on the form XY company limited, and it reject, and you're held up from that, and you may need the document, Madam Deputy Speaker, to carry to the bank to get a loan. That is the kind of repercussions, practical repercussions that we have by the bureaucracy that is Barbados, that is the web sometimes of doing business. As I said, not only in government, but in the private sector that follows suit too. So we still have in this country a lot of regulations and stipulations that in a lot of cases the bureaucrats put on. That is the truth of the matter. That hold up business that come from the colonial era. But we still got them 58 years after independence. Not to mention 3 years after being a whole republic. The first and only republic for this century in the whole world. We still got these colonial and archaic rules and bound by a whole set of civil service rules that predate Barbados' independence, that holding up the progress of this country. And for example, when I was Minister of Immigration had a whole set of things on there that were not legislated. So to get citizenship or permanent status, you had to get a QEH, a letter from the QEH, Honourable Minister of State in Ministry of Health, that said you didn't owe QEH any money. You never went in QEH yet in your life yet. But still you had to wait a whole year to get a letter from QEH to say that you don't owe QEH any money. And all that time you can't get your citizenship, you can't get your permanent status, you can't get your immigrant status. Well, I said, no, but that is nonsense. Show me in anywhere, in any law in Barbados, which says that you have to get a letter from the QEH to get citizenship. You can't show me? Well, done. From today, that is not required. And that is just one example. So that is what we're dealing with as a parliament. That is what we're dealing with as a parliament. So are you not, Madam Deputy Speaker, at this stage of my career, and at my age now, I'm not getting into legal niceties like the leader of the opposition. That is the truth. The Honourable Leader of the opposition and I studied the same law. We went through law school, law faculty together over 40 years ago. But I'm not like him. I really don't have time nor the energy right now to get into the legal niceties and things. If there's some ambiguity in the bill, well, the law court's there for that. That's what the law court there for. People go in the law courts every day. Well, there's no perfect bill. There's no perfection in the English language. So, we're not getting into that. The goal of this bill is to try and bring some kind of efficiency in dealing with corporate affairs in this country and intellectual property. That is the truth. It is to elevate the quality of service, customer service to the people of Barbados, and by extension to non-Barbadians who want to invest in this little rock. It is to strengthen Barbados' competitive position within this region, because it can't be that the Cayman Islands and Tortola and Bermuda and other countries, St. Lucia too, that you have ease of doing business in terms of corporate affairs and investment and commercial enterprises in Barbados. You file something in the corporate registry, right? And after 18 months you can't get it back. That is the truth. All you get back is your receipt showing that you file it. You can't get your documents. But that is the reality of the situation. There's a backlog of documents in at the registry, and any attorney at law or their clerk who deals with that entity on a daily basis will tell you that they're real frustrated. And I said, as I said, I'm not getting into personalities, ma'am, but I have a duty as a member of parliament sent here by the people, good people of St. James North, to speak. So when I look at this, at the whole scenario, Madam Deputy Speaker, first thing, opening hours, and this transcends government, many government departments, that you open at 8:30 in the morning or 9 o'clock, wherever, because by the time the officers settle in, and I'm not being personal, and then by 3 o'clock you close for cash. In some places 2:30, closed down, you can't pay. Well, as a lawyer, ma'am, I never refuse cash yet. You bring money to me, legal fees, I taking it. If you want to come at midnight and give me, I in my office, I taking the money. So I go to a department at 3 minutes past 3 the other day to pay some money, and they tell me that they can't take the money, the accountant closed the till already. I went to another one, 3:30, and they tell me, man, we close at 2:30, you can't take the money, but we're going to accommodate you because it's you. Well, to be truthful, I shouldn't have to be accommodated because it's Edmund Hinkson. That is the truth. That if it's an ordinary person, they can't get accommodated. So this really and truly boggles my mind. that you want money in government departments to run this country, to pay for all the services that I outlined at the start of my speech. But the government departments closing off at 2:30, 3 o'clock. They say so that the workers could add up the money or go and do some other business. We should have longer work hours in this country in government service and flexi time. That is the truth. That is what is needed in this country. That it can't be a small window of opportunity and then at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, the officer going for lunch might take a whole hour and a half too. And you driving around. So therefore, look, we have to get more of the payments on stream, online for one, that you don't have to walk about in hot sun taking money, right? But government departments have to open for purposes of receiving money after 3 o'clock. That is one of the problems. We have to get a longer work station in this country. And flexi time can do it. But some people will be willing to come into work maybe 11 o'clock in the morning when the traffic clear and work till 8 o'clock or something in the night. So this is one of the problems that curtailing us, and if it needs serious discussions with the trade union, let us have these serious discussions with the trade union. And this is what this act, as I understand it, at least is about. So it isn't only talking, the talk is now trying to make a reformation onto an archaic system of doing business into a department, corporate affairs and intellectual property, that control hundreds of millions of dollars every year. So one of the business ministers in the former administration, who the Honourable member for St. James South knows because she beat him warmly in 2018, he used to talk. He used to say the same thing that he's saying, that we need to open longer hours, but he had the opportunity as business minister and never did it. Couldn't get his prime minister to agree, couldn't get his cabinet to agree. So nothing was done. The corporate registry and intellectual property office got worse and worse. So this is an attempt to try to deal with this issue, to deal with the 1,000 telephone calls that you have daily. That's impossible to deal with. Because when you, and I look at the schedule of personal emoluments for this year, and it tells me that both in the last financial year and this current one, they only have 39 workers, 39 people working in this department of KIPO. How many of them are legally trained or, experts, skilled in their fields? Look like less than half. You can't run a multi-million-dollar department, multi-million-dollar department on this. You have to give it resources, both human and financial. So you have to be fair to those who are there. That is the truth. I feel that the too bureaucratic, and because my T not crossed, you send back my document. But you have to give it resources. The Honourable Minister in the other place has, I believe, in her presentation to the Senate, I think it was 3 weeks ago on this bill, has committed that the resources will be given. Because we could vote here, as we will do today, to bring into force and establishment this entity, Business Barbados. But if the resources are not given to it, we're still in the same waters, swimming boat, drowning. That is the truth. So I look forward to seeing the resources being given to this entity, because this is an entity that is one of the primary productive, managing one of the primary productive sources of income in this country. Tourism, number one. International business, commercial enterprises, investments, number two. And the reality is that within the last few years, the taxes from international business have declined tremendously. And one of the reasons for that, over the years, we're trying to build it back up now, is that companies and investors in those areas frustrated with Barbados in terms of the bureaucracy and going somewhere else. Say if it's taking so long to do basic business in this country, let me go somewhere else to do it. So this is an attempt to right that failure, because Barbados has to be on the cutting edge and leading edge within this region in terms of investment. We have the communication services setups. We lead on that. We have the skill base necessary. We have the educational system necessary. We have the properties there, the high-end properties necessary for people who would want to buy properties. But we can't be lagging behind in terms of ease of doing business. Right now, there's no separation between the corporate entity and the intellectual property entity of the corporate affairs department. And that can't be right. Well, that is common sense. Well, how you could have the same people administering two vital areas of productive and economic activity. So I looked in the official gazette, August, and you're seeing trademarks that were applied for way back in 2017, 7 years ago, now being advertised. 7 years ago. And that is so historically, because the first time I remember in my career, I registered some trademarks in it would have been around 1990. I had a client out of Jamaica that was doing business here and was registering trademarks. It took much about 3 years. And I wrote the Chief Justice. At that time, he had oversight over the corporate registry, the then Chief Justice, on the issue. Didn't get anywhere with it. That is the truth. So this has been happening for years and years. This ain't now come back. It now come to this government to try and resolve this issue. And as was said by the Honourable Minister the Honourable Member for St. James South, I mean, people's intellectual property rights have to be protected. That is the truth. And if you can't get them protected, it's going to retard innovation and enterprise. So this is what this bill is about. The benefit of this bill is going to be greater independence and management capacity, ability to make and implement decisions more swiftly, because we know that the department, as it is now under mainstream government, will be tied in with a whole bureaucracy and decision-making process and a file passing wrong from here to here. And this officer here go on holiday for 4 weeks, and when they come back, the file's still on the desk. Nobody ain't look at it because they don't have the manpower and the resources, etc. So this is to try and tackle that in a real way. So I am fully supportive of this bill. I am willing to give this bill a chance. This whole entity, it has been done, statutory corporations, it's done at the QEA, it's done at NIS last year. We did that, parliamentary legislation to bring those entities, for example, into force. And we hope that there will be less bureaucracy and more flexibility by the officers in dealing with matters. So, as I said, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am not into legal niceties. There's provision for regulations under Clause 37 of this bill to be made to give effect to the provisions of the Act. I would certainly believe that the Minister responsible will ensure that those regulations are made. There are regulations under the Act, the CAIPO Act, which this Act will repeal. And regulations certainly need to come and to come into force pretty soon. To deal with a couple of the points that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition made, I don't know. As I said, you know, the Honourable Opposition Leader spends a whole heap of time, as he did today, repeating points. I don't know if he feels that the points have greater credibility by repetition. I am one who doesn't subscribe to that notion, that if you have a proper point, you make it and you move on. But if you don't have a proper point, you go on repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. That is the truth. But not that the strength of your argument increases by repetition, not at all. But I see nothing different in this piece of legislation than in other pieces of legislation. A minister has ultimate responsibility because it's the minister that is accountable, one, to cabinet, the cabinet colleagues, but even more importantly to the public. Even more importantly to the public, the minister is responsible. So in this piece of legislation, the minister may give directions of a general nature, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch South said. That is typical. Christchurch West said that is typical. In some pieces of legislation, the minister has the authority to give specific directions. I don't know, quite honestly, how the draftsman decides which pieces of legislation minister can give general policy directions and which specific, but this one is general. So you know, you can't give specific things, give this contract to X, Y, tomorrow. It's general nature, has to be in writing, so there's a paper trail. And that is normal. And the entity, board of directors, should comply with those directions. We have seen under the last Democratic Labour Party administration, and even the one before that too, wherein at least two statutory boards that come to my mind very, very quickly: National Conservation Commission and the Barbados Water Authority, where people appointed themselves executive chairmen, gave themselves salaries of about $150,000 when there was no legislative provision for that. Yes, the Democrat, I said it last administration.
And we have
Breach of the law, serious breach of the law. Executive chairman, when you look through the NCC Act, and I know that Act well, because I was chairman, that was one of my first public appointments in the mid-1990s, and when you look through the BWA Act, you saw no such position, but yet people were appointed there to those positions, $150,000 a year, obviously with the knowledge of the ministers in charge, to do the ministers' bidding, and a whole heap of steel going through the headers.
I remember you have 3 minutes.
Yes, ma'am. So you have a special audit by the Auditor General talking about $1.4 billion that cannot be accounted for at the BWA as a result of this kind of legislative inexactitudes under the last administration. The Democratic Labour Party or its leader has no moral authority to speak about anything such as these. The issue of whether the registrars can take directions from the CEO. The registrar is crazy judicial position. Well, the Honourable Member for Christchurch South admitted that himself. And therefore, you don't want to tie in the decisions of a registrar of corporate affairs or intellectual property with a politically appointed board of directors. I would have thought that anyone with reasonable knowledge of politics and political processes would understand that. And if an individual has difficulty with a decision of a registrar, that's what the court's there for, to appeal the decision of the registrar, not appeal to the minister or to the board of directors. I mean, that's, as I understand it, good corporate governance. So I look forward, Madam Deputy Speaker, to seeing when this rolls out, this entity, and I know that there's talks about transitioning from the KIPO to the new entity already started. I look forward to when it is enforced to see a more efficient registry where people will no longer be frustrated, where applications that you pay for will be processed much quicker, whether within the intellectual property side or the corporate side, where monies would be given, resources to modernize the presently outdated IT infrastructure, which requires seriously digital transformation. I mean, that period's what, within the last year where the equipment break down at corporate registry and you can't get anything done for a week or so because the equipment outdated. So we need to put in resources. Wherever entity you have, resources need to be given, Cabinet and Honourable Minister, to this new entity, because this is an entity that is dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, which has to process many documents which are required legislatively and otherwise, and it deserves to be given the human resource capacity, and hence the provision that the minister, or rather that the board, can appoint experts, but with the approval of the minister, with the minister obviously having oversight on the salary and perks and etc. of the expert. And that has to be so, because I mean, the board can't go on its willy-nilly and give all kind of big salaries which are out of sync with the salaries in other government entities, statutory corporations, or out of sync with the policy of the government of Barbados. So we look forward to the human resources increasing this 39, where only less than half of them, by my quick reading here, a lot less than half are skilled in terms of dealing with the applications, etc., or able to make, or in a decision-making capacity, and where the technical and technological resources are given, so that we can see an improvement in the customer service of this entity and see an ease of doing business, which is so absolutely important to the economic development of this country and the productive advancement of our people. I'm obliged to you, Madam.